Hello everyone, tonight we are sitting in the soft, sinking dark of a room that remembers too much. You are here. The wallpaper still curls like it's breathing and the wooden floor flexes with a low sigh you can't trace. The light you switched off. It clicked twice. The second time your finger wasn't on the switch. You probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You buried the doll with coins in its mouth. A handful of ancient bronze slugs, dull with green patina copied from an old funerary rite meant to pay a ferryman no one believes in anymore. But the mouth still moves. It twitches when no one is watching. Just a slight crease at the cheek like a secret being swallowed. You've seen it in the mirror across the room, caught it mid-whisper, mid-mimic. You tried turning the doll's face to the wall, but it always ends up facing the door again as if it's listening for footsteps. The doll belonged to no one, which is part of the problem. You found it behind the hearth in the oldest part of the house, the part that never really warmed, tucked behind scorched bricks and smoke-black beams, as though something tried to burn it out and gave up. It wasn't a child's toy. Its face was too still. Its limbs were sewn from what might have been eel skin, or perhaps strips of some other hide brittle with age and brined with something that wasn't salt. You held it wrong and it hissed. That's when the dreams started. Not nightmares dreams. Gentle, slow wrong. Dreams where the doll was sitting on the windowsill staring out. Its mouth filled with foreign coins, Roman, Greek, Sumerian. Some were stamped with animals long gone. Others had no markings, just smooth weight and cold. You'd wake up with one in your palm, still wet, once you bit down on one. Out of reflex, it tasted like rust and riverbank. The next morning, your tongue was black for 6 hours. You blamed the tea. That's always a safe answer in old houses. Scholars argue about these rites. Some say the coins in mouth custom dates only to classical Greece. Others trace it to Neolithic burials near Varna, where gold foil was placed over teeth like a promise that couldn't be spoken aloud. And some still insist it was never about a fairy, it was to keep the dead from whispering. You'd laugh if the doll weren't humming again. It only hums when it thinks you're not listening. A dry, tuneless vibration, the kind your grandmother's cracked phonograph used to make before it melted in the fire. The fire you never lit. The humming isn't in any key. You checked. Even played it back through an old cassette deck to see if there was a code or a song, or maybe just a bad recording of a field cricket. Instead, you heard your own voice repeating, "Don't leave the window open." You don't remember saying that, but the doll does. There's folklore naturally about dolls like this. Most are charming in the way moldy cheese is charming. One 14th century account from the Carpathians speaks of coin-throated familiars, buried in orchard soil to feed the voices of the dead. The coins were meant to trap the breath. The breath in turn spoke back. It's all very poetic until you consider the orchard was found with 117 finger bones all pointing west. Your backyard faces west. One joke you've told yourself more than once is, at least it doesn't walk. That's the bar now. That's the threshold for peace. Not movement, not screams, not the smell of wet breath under the bed, just stillness. But last Thursday you woke to a dirt trail across the carpet. A thin furrow. A dragging path that began at the place where you buried the doll beneath the loose floorboard and ended at your pillow. There was no doll in sight, just a faint circle of wet on the sheet. A ring coin-shaped. It left no stain. You touched it and it hissed. You tried burying it again, deeper this time. You walked into the old orchard where the trees bend toward the center as if apologizing and dug with your hands. You counted 7 coins. The number you read in that footnote from the Latvian ethnographer, the one who went missing in 1931 after studying whisper-laced graves. 7 coins, always 7. To stop the mouth from opening, You packed the dirt. You whispered a name. You never learned whose name it was. But it tasted like ash on your tongue and you felt watched ever since. Some nights, the floorboard creaks even though no one walks across it. And the mirror near the hearth, the one you've draped with a towel, still shows two people in the room. Just for a blink, then one vanishes. One last joke. You once called a friend and joked, if the doll ever smiles, I'll scream. The phone buzzed before you hit dial. It played the hum. Tonight, the mirror is clear. The doll is where you left it. The coins are still in its mouth. One is missing. Check your pocket. Just to be sure, the second coin appeared in your left boot. Not lodged, placed. Right beneath the arch, as if something knew that's where your weight settles when you freeze. You found it while tying the laces, felt the cold nudge of metal against your sock, and thought maybe you'd dropped some change. But when you turned it over in your fingers, it wasn't currency you recognized. Not even close. No language, just a symbol, a circle with a line through it, almost like an eye closed in prayer. You dropped it instinctively, but it didn't hit the floor. There was no sound, nothing, just the absence of impact. When you checked, it was gone. Of course it was. You've been here before in this room that holds its breath. Not literally, of course. That would be too easy to explain, but the air feels thinner lately, doesn't it? It's not that you can't breathe, it's that the house is waiting for something and you are the something. There's a theory, one of those strange museum curator blog theories, that dolls weren't always toys. Before they were playthings, they were warnings. Effigies, decoys, vessels. You've read that in Mesopotamia, small humanoid figures were sometimes buried under the threshold of a house meant to trap wandering spirits. But some of those figures were hollow, and not all of them were empty. Some researchers still argue whether these were ritual offerings or tools of control. Whether you were keeping something out or keeping something in. You're no archaeologist, but you've noticed something: the doll's mouth is opening wider. You didn't think that was possible. It's sewn tight after all. You used the strongest thread you could find. Black waxed linen, the kind used in bookbinding. You stitched its mouth shut by candlelight, humming nervously as you worked like a parent pretending bedtime is normal. But the threads stretch now, just a little. One loop has snapped. Another hangs loose as though the doll is smiling with one side of its face. You haven't told anyone. Who would believe you? Dolls don't move. Coins don't hum. And haunted houses are just metaphors for grief, right? Still, you avoid the hearth now. Even though that's where the only warm air comes from. Even though the rest of the house is cold enough to make your teeth ache when you speak aloud. You've stopped speaking aloud. The irony, of course, is that this whole thing started because you wanted silence. The city was too loud. The neighbors were too cheerful. Even your own footsteps annoyed you. So you bought the cottage, the one tucked in the woods, the one the realtor whispered about like it had a secret. Old charm. Stone bones. She stood through every war, they said. They didn't mention the doll. They didn't mention the faint scratching in the walls at 2:13 a.m. every night, scratching that stops if you hum the right note. You haven't figured out what that note is, but you're getting closer. The doll helps in its way. It hums while you sleep. Or while you pretend to, and the dreams are evolving. Now the orchard is full of figures, not people figures. Wrapped in cloth, stiff-limbed heads tilted upward. You can't see their faces, but they breathe like rustling paper. And every time you try to bury the doll again in these dreams, they shake their heads. Slowly, synchronously. You think they're trying to warn you, or maybe they just want the doll back. You tried fire once. You built a neat little pyre in the fireplace, fed it the doll like an offering, watched the flames curl up around it. But when the fire burned down, the doll was still there. Not untouched, changed. Its skin bubbled, yes. Its eyes cracked, but it was whole. And now it smells faintly of cedar and something darker. Something like ash that remembers. You've started to hear your own voice in rooms you haven't entered. Saying things you don't remember thinking. Asking questions like, is the ferry coming soon and who paid your way last time? Jokes come easier in daylight, of course. You told one just yesterday, if the doll ever applies for a passport, I'm moving. You laughed, no one else did. Mostly because you were alone. Probably. Folklore time, one of your favorites in parts of old Italy. Travelers used to carry tiny carved dolls called bambini muti children. These figures were fed drops of wine before crossing unfamiliar bridges. If they cracked, the crossing was unsafe. If they warmed in the palm, the path ahead was clear. You've held your doll in your hand. It never warms. Tonight you're hearing the hum again. Fainter but layered, as if two, maybe three versions of the doll are humming together, harmonizing. You can't tell if it's inside your head or behind the wall, or both. The mirror you covered last week. Did you mean to uncover it? You're sure it was covered this morning? But the towel is folded now, neatly placed on your pillow like a gift. There's a coin in its center. Not the second coin. A third. It's etched with a symbol you recognize immediately, the outline of a mouth sewn shut. You want to believe this is sleepwalking. Repetition. Psychological feedback loop. You want to believe you're just very, very tired. But there's something about the orchard tonight. You can feel it. You know the trees are listening again. You haven't walked among them since the 7th coin. But the 8th one has just arrived. You're holding it now. You don't remember picking it up. There's a limit to how many times a mirror can lie before it starts telling the truth again. Yours is somewhere in the middle, offering glimpses that arrive half a second too late, like it's trying to keep up with your reflection but losing the race. You tilt your head and your image delays slightly, like it's thinking it over. You don't remember when that started, but now you watch the mirror more than yourself, especially at night. Especially when you hear the floor groan not from pressure but from permission. You buried the 8th coin, but the doll coughed it back up. Not literally. Don't worry, there's no gore here. Just the small sound of metal rolling across a wooden floor that hadn't been walked on. You checked the doll afterward. Its mouth hadn't moved. Its stitches were intact, but you were holding the coin again. You think the house is trying to teach you something. Not in a helpful way. More like a riddle posed by a tree that doesn't care if you starve beneath it. You've started tracing the origin of the symbols. The eye, the stitched mouth, the strange circle. Late at night, you flip through old folklore indexes, university-published monographs, fragments of tomb rubbings. One pattern keeps appearing, a symbol used by a Bronze Age culture that left behind no language. Only burial items and a recurring motif of mouths bound shut, surrounded by coins not used for trade. Some researchers think these were not meant for the dead, but for the listeners. That's what they're called in the footnotes of a very old, very reluctant paper published out of Tallinn in 1967. The author disappeared soon after, presumed drowned, according to his widow, who kept his study locked until her own passing. Listeners were believed to live behind the walls, not metaphorically, literally behind walls, waiting to hear a voice that matched an old promise or debt. And when they heard that voice, they followed it slowly, patiently, until it led them to the mouth. Then they made sure it stayed open. You've been humming in your sleep. The voice recorder caught it. You hadn't planned to listen. Who likes to hear themselves sleep? But there it was, low, uncertain humming, matching the doll's melody, and beneath it something else. Not a second voice. A rhythm, like something breathing in time, as if it's learning the song. You try to laugh. Another joke, I'm starting a band. Dollcore. Genre eldritch folk. But your voice catches. You realize you don't remember what your real laugh sounds like anymore. Everything you've said in the last week has been quiet. Measured, like you're worried someone is listening in. Someone probably is. This morning you found the front door open. Not wide, just enough to let something slip through. The lock wasn't broken. The wind didn't do it. And the threshold was clean. Too clean. You remember the threshold was dusty before. A fine powder of ash and whatever the doll left behind. But now it's been swept clear, carefully, lovingly, as if preparing for something. The doll still hasn't moved, but its head tilts slightly more to the right than yesterday. You checked the photo. You've been documenting it now, taking one picture per day. Same angle, same lighting. It's your way of staying sane. A record, evidence. But today's photo won't save. Your phone crashes each time you try. The app closes. The screen flickers. At one point, it starts vibrating and won't stop until you place the phone next to the doll. You told yourself it was static. Just static. You whispered that 3 times before sleeping. You woke up with a coin under your tongue. Joke time, because why not? The tooth fairy upgraded. Now she's giving out artifacts. You spit the coin out, wiped your mouth, and placed it with the others. 9 now. 9 when there were supposed to be 7. You double-checked every record, every ritual, every folk burial, 7 to seal. More than that, no one agrees. Most scholars didn't expect anyone to go beyond 7. Some say 8 breaks the silence. Others say 9 is the listener's number. 10 they don't write about. You've been walking the orchard again. At night when the trees hum low and the wind smells like memory, the path keeps shifting. What once was a neat trail has become a spiral, a soft looping pattern like a labyrinth. You walk it without thinking now. Your feet remember. And at the center beneath, the oldest tree is a stone. You never noticed it before. It's not large, not marked, but it's warm. Warmer than the air around it. And if you press your ear to it, you can hear the same hum. You don't remember falling asleep there, but you woke up with soil under your fingernails. There's a word scratched into your arm. Not cut drawn in ash or soot. Faint. Gone now. But you remember the shape. The stitched mouth. The closed eye. You're no longer sure the doll is the problem. You're starting to suspect it's the messenger. Something else is listening through it. Or maybe it was left here to protect you from what listens beneath. Which raises a different question. What have you disturbed by trying to bury it? You haven't spoken aloud in 3 days. Not since the whisper came from the other side of the mirror, the one you draped again this time with a quilt heavy enough to hush a choir. You'd like to believe it was a dream. That the whisper was your own voice bouncing off memory. That it didn't say your name, but it did. And it said, that mouth isn't yours anymore. So you stay quiet now. Even your thoughts feel too loud. You carry the coins in a linen pouch stitched closed with the same black thread you used on the doll. You've begun to treat them like sacred things, counting them by touch, placing them in patterns, setting them in bowls of salt. There are 11 now. Always one more than you remember, and always cool to the touch. Never warm. A folklorist named Dorel published a curious little pamphlet in 1919 entitled Tongues of Metal Apotropaics and Pre-Oral Sacrifice. It was recalled shortly after printing following accusations of forgery and theological obscenity. Only a few copies survived. One resides in the backroom archive of your local museum, filed under unverified ritual objects. You weren't allowed to photograph it, but you read enough. Dorel claimed that certain coins, when buried under the tongue or stitched into a doll, could absorb not just voice but will. He wrote of a tradition in which families passed down mute effigies not for protection, but as memory banks for ancestral promises. You don't recall making a promise, but someone remembers for you. The orchard has changed again. You've stopped pretending it's a dream. The path to the center now contains objects, a comb carved from what looks like antler, a tooth with a hole bored clean through, and a single child's shoe wrapped in twine. You step around them respectfully. You don't remember placing them there, but they feel like offerings. The stone at the center is warm enough to fog your breath now. You knelt beside it last night. You hummed, and the stone hummed back. In harmony. No one told you the earth could sing. You came back inside to find the doll missing. It wasn't under the floorboard or behind the hearth or on the windowsill where it sometimes returned. You didn't panic. You just stood in the doorway and said softly, despite yourself, "Where are you?" The reply didn't come from the walls. It came from your own throat. Not your voice, but from inside you. A child's voice whispering, "I was waiting to be asked." That's when you notice the 12th coin resting at the base of your neck, under your collar, pressed lightly to your spine. You don't know how it got there. You don't ask anymore. Scholars still argue whether the dolls were ever meant to contain anything at all, or if they were hollow to invite things in. Some point to burial positions, dolls placed face down as if ashamed. Others note their placement near doorways as if guarding the threshold from something on this side trying to escape. You've begun to suspect you were the one they meant to guard. Your mouth tingles when you try to speak now. Not pain, not numbness, something in between. As if someone else is deciding whether you deserve to use it. Your dreams are nearly silent. Just the soft pad of bare feet on wooden floors. Sometimes you see yourself walking ahead of yourself, face turned away, holding the doll by the neck. You never turn around. Accident. And when you wake, the mirror is uncovered again. Tonight you tried writing, just notes, a list of dates, a sequence of where each coin appeared. But your handwriting keeps shifting. Mid-sentence, mid-letter. Slanted, spidery shapes you don't remember learning. You've taken to drawing symbols instead. The closed mouth, the ear inside a spiral, a hand with 7 fingers. The 13th coin rolled in during the storm. You'd almost forgotten what weather felt like, how the air comes alive, how the trees lean. You were standing at the window tracing the lightning when the coin clinked against the stone hearth. Not dropped, thrown. You turned and there it was. The doll, sitting, legs outstretched like a child waiting to be noticed. Its head tilted a little more than before, almost entirely sideways now. And its mouth. The thread was gone, not torn. Removed. Laid neatly beside it in a spiral. 7 loops, 1 for each night you ignored the hum. Each one holding the imprint of something's teeth. The mouth is open, not wide but enough. Enough to hum freely. And it does. The sound is low and steady. It fills the house without moving. You feel it in the base of your spine. You feel it in your molars. And as the 13th coin warms in your hand, you realize it's not humming alone. The mirror has begun to fog from the inside. You haven't spoken in 3 days, but your breath is still visible in the reflection even when you hold it. And behind that fog, just faintly, you see a hand, touching the glass from the other side. Not waving, just waiting. The 14th coin is already in your mouth when you wake. You don't choke. It doesn't alarm you. It simply is like dew or gravity or the second shadow in the corner of the room. You remove it gently, as if plucking a berry from your own throat, and place it on the windowsill beside the others. They rest in a circle now. Not arranged by you. They move, you think, while your eyes are closed, careful, courteous adjustments. Always keeping the circle neat. Always just beyond your memory. The doll is gone again? Not missing. Gone. There's a difference. You know the rhythm of its disappearances now, how it fades when you name it, and returns when you forget. It's part of the trade silence in exchange for presence, memory in exchange for breath. But the presence has lingered. There's a feeling in the house like watching someone else breathe through a window, like hearing a lullaby from a room that doesn't exist anymore. You walk more softly now, even on rugs. You hum less. You do not speak. The house prefers this. At first you thought the doll was an intrusion, a haunted object, a spirit sponge with porcelain limbs. But the longer you've lived here, the more you wonder if it's not the doll that's haunted but you. The 15th coin arrives tucked into a fold of your pillowcase, warm from your cheek. You consider not moving it. But when you do, there's a faint resistance, like peeling off something that had almost become part of you. You place it in the circle. The others make space. There's a passage you found in a mistranslated fragment from the dead cities of Syria, describing figures who could not die because they forgot how to close their mouths. Priests would stitch thin slabs of metal across their lips, not to silence them, but to remind them that silence was a door, not a prison. Some researchers dismiss it as metaphor. Others argue it was never practiced at all. A few suggest the ritual wasn't meant for the dead, but for the living who dreamed too deeply. That part rings truer every night. You sleepwalk now. You've begun waking up in the orchard again, always in a different spot. One night, at the base of the stone where the warmth has turned to heat. Another near the outer ring beneath a tree that now leans closer than it did before. and once beside a second doll. Not identical, not even similar, taller, thinner, made of twine and teeth and a single braided ribbon the color of rusted blood. Its mouth is open. You didn't touch it. You just whispered, "I'm not ready." And it nodded. The mirror shows different things now, not reflections, versions, possibilities, warnings. Each time you glance, the timing shifts. Sometimes you're already there, already looking. Sometimes you're gone. And sometimes worse, you're still, but something behind you isn't. Last night the mirror fogged, and a phrase etched into the condensation from the inside, "One more coin." You counted them again. There were 16. The circle has expanded. They hum together now, no longer mimicking the doll, but harmonizing in their own rhythm. The hearth has started glowing faintly at night, even without fire. The air smells of copper and sweet wet ash. There's no going back. You know this. You've stopped trying to remember what day it is. The house has no clocks. Your phone no longer charges. The doll doesn't need time, so neither do you. You hear it in your sleep, a single word repeated soft and low. Not in a language you know, but in a tone you understand. Invitation. It's always an invitation. You accept tonight. You walk barefoot to the hearth where the last coin waits. The 17th. The final. You don't need to bury it. You don't need to swallow it. You simply listen. And in that stillness beneath the hum beyond the coin, through the stitching that was never meant to last, you hear the voice you lost long ago. You promised not to forget me, and now gently, softly, you remember. Some say memory is just the shadow of breath. That every promise not kept becomes a mouth still moving a lullaby without end. You sit in silence now, but it's not loneliness. It's a kind of companionship wrapped in ash and rust and lullabies. The orchard no longer waits, it welcomes. The mirror no longer lies, it listens. And the doll. The doll was never meant to haunt. It was meant to hold. You were the voice it carried. Now you are the quiet it leaves behind. One breath, one coin, one hum slowly fading.